Throughout Hitler's Nazi Germany, there were a spate of executions that occurred when someone outright defied and resisted the politics and the party of the Führer. To oppose Hitler was incredibly dangerous, and it usually meant a few things if you did: transportation to a concentration camp, and almost likely in your death. There were executioners that worked for Hitler across Germany to perform the executions of these brave people who went against the regime. We've previously looked at the incredible story of Sophie and Hans Scholl, who worked as part of the White Rose movement, a group that distributed leaflets across German universities, in which the pamphlets dissented against the government. Today we look at a similar story, and one which features the youngest opponent of Hitler's Third Reich, who was tragically sentenced to death. So join us today as we look at the tragic death of Helmuth Hubener, the youngest person to be executed within Hitler's Germany. And remember to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Helmuth Hubener was born on the 8th of January 1925 in Hamburg and was raised within a religious family that belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. His family was mostly apolitical and didn't divulge into political affairs and matters. However, his adoptive father was a Nazi sympathiser who listened to the ideas of the party. Hubener as a child became a member of the Boy Scouts, an outdoor-based youth group who was supported by his church. In Germany at the time there was a shift towards certain youth groups which Hitler favoured, such as the Hitler Youth and the League of German Maidens. These youth groups were used to brainwash children into the Nazi ideals, with boys joining the Hitler Youth and completing military drills in an aim of Hitler being able to strengthen his army later in life. The Nazis banned the scouting movement in Germany, and Helmuth was forced to join the Hitler Youth. However, when Kristallnacht occurred, where there was a systematic and violent attack on Jewish businesses and homes, Jewish synagogues and the Jewish people, Helmuth turned his back on the group. Even at a young age he knew that the group were not good, and he realised that the Nazis were taking Germany down a path that he could not support. Inside his church, one of the local leaders started to ban Jews from attending religious services, and Helmuth had to choose between continuing to attend despite the persecution within the church against Jews. He did continue but did debate the policies. Within the Church of Latter-day Saints in Hamburg there were 2,000 parishioners, and only 7 of these were pro-Nazi. However, 5 of these belonged to Helmuth's branch and congregation, and within these local services these people began to stir controversy. They would propagate Nazi ideas and try to influence those within the church who weren't Nazi. Hubener would continue attending and continue with his schooling, completing middle school in 1941 at the age of 16. He began to become an apprentice in admin at the Hamburg Social Authority, and within this organisation he would meet a number of new friends and other apprentices. One of them was Gerhard Derver, who would introduce Helmuth to the idea of resistance and defying the Nazis, and Helmuth began integrated into the resistance movement. Inside a bathhouse a group of youngsters would gather and listen to foreign and banned radio broadcasts. This was incredibly serious at the time, and the listening of foreign radio in Nazi Germany was even considered to be a form of treason. Within the group he met a number of new friends, including those from different backgrounds. Helmuth would also find out that his older brother had a radio hidden away, which had been given to him by a friend after he served in military service in France. He then began to listen to BBC broadcasts from Great Britain, and he began to work. By listening to the broadcasts, Helmuth would then write down and compose his own ideas that were anti-Nazi. Helmuth Hubener would write anti-war and anti-national socialist leaflets and make a number of copies of these. This was an incredibly serious and dangerous thing to do, which would usually result in a guilty verdict at a treason trial, with the defendant being sentenced to death. The work that Hubener was completing was intended to make people think how censored, inaccurate and biased the war reports coming out of Berlin by the Nazis were. At the time the Nazis would only tell their own story, and would tell these false facts to keep up the morale of the German people. Helmuth would write about Hitler, Goebbels and other leading Nazis, and how criminal their behaviour was. He also explored the idea of how pointless a war was, and how Germany would eventually be defeated, whilst also mentioning that there was mistreatment occurring within the Hitler Youth. An extract from one leaflet says, "German boys, do you know the country without freedom, the country of terror and tyranny? Yes, you know it well, but are afraid to talk about it. They have intimidated you to such an extent that you don't dare talk of fear of reprisals. Through terror tactics, they have succeeded in making you spineless puppets to do their bidding. With this, Helmuth is appealing to the German people, saying they need to speak out and defy their regime. Towards the end of 1941, Hubener along with 3 friends would work together, and Hubener had his friends helping him distribute the pamphlets across Hamburg by pinning them on notice boards, putting them in letterboxes, and even dropping them in people's coat pockets. Now obviously this work was incredibly dangerous, and on the 5th of February 1942, Helmuth Hubener was arrested at work by the Gestapo. A co-worker and member of the Nazi Party had noticed what Hubener was doing, and as a result told the German secret police on him. He was only just 17 when he was arrested, and he was imprisoned for a number of months before being placed on trial on the 11th of August 1942. Despite being only 17, he was tried as an adult. At the time it was rare for Nazis to try an underage defendant. However, Hubener was adjudged to have more than average intelligence than a boy of his age, and because of his political intelligence and his behaviour, he was considered to have a far more developed mind than the average boy. For this, Hubener was considered liable to be punished as an adult, rather than a child. He was placed on trial for treason, and was swiftly sentenced to death for his crimes against the Nazi government. In front of the judges, Hubener bravely said, "Now I must die, even though I've committed no crime, so now it's my turn, but your turn will come." By being confrontational against the judges, he hoped he would get the most serious punishment, with his friends being spared. He was found guilty and was to be executed, but was also sentenced to a permanent loss of his civil rights. This allowed prison guards who oversaw his incarceration before his execution to abuse and torture Helmuth, and he was kept in horrific conditions without bedding or blankets, and was left in a dark and cold cell. Hubener's lawyers, along with his mother and even the Berlin Gestapo, appealed for leniency for Helmuth based on his age, and they wanted his death sentence commuted to life imprisonment. They believed that as he confessed this was noble, but the Reich youth leadership did not accept this, and outlined the danger that Hubener had caused to the Reich and the war effort, saying that his death was necessary. Whilst in prison, as his death approached, he wrote to his friends saying, "I am very grateful to my Heavenly Father that my miserable life will soon come to an end. My Father in heaven knows I have done nothing wrong. I know that God lives and he will be the just judge in the matter. I look forward to seeing you in a better world." On the 27th of October, the Nazi Ministry of Justice upheld the verdict and supported the initial sentence of death. Cruelly at 1:05 in the afternoon, Helmuth Hubener was told of this decision, and he was due to be executed on the exact same day. At Plärtensee prison in Berlin, where he had been kept, at 8:13 in the evening, he was executed using the guillotine. He had been led into the execution chamber a few minutes before, and then using this morbid and morose instrument of death that the guillotine was, he was beheaded with ruthless efficiency. When he was taken from this world, he was only just 17 years of age. He has gone down in history as the youngest opponent of the Nazi Party and the Third Reich to be executed by the People's Court. Helmuth's legacy and plan for him to suffer the ultimate punishment at the expense of his friends worked, as his words to the judges at the trial meant that his 2 friends were given 5 and 10-year prison sentences, rather than enduring the death sentence that Helmuth himself faced. He remained throughout the Third Reich as the youngest person to be executed and sentenced to death by the German courts. He was a young man of principle, who believed he was doing the right thing in the face of evil, and it's remarkable at such a young age how Helmuth Hubener managed to see the evil within the darkest regime of the 20th century. His story is one that should be remembered in the history books for the centuries to come. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.